Whatever Next Unplugged. Conversations about making transformation more human, more honest, and more likely to stick. And here's my next guest, Perry Timms, Chief Energy Officer and founder of People and Transformational HR. Welcome to Whatever Next Unplugged. And today I have Perry Timms. Hi, Perry.
Hello, Lisa, you all right?
Perry, you're the first person on the show who's very connected into the HR community.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And I'm really intrigued to hear about how the HR community are showing up in transformations right now.
So what a lovely opener, because I guess there's a bit of a spectrum. I'm ironically kind of closer to those that are much more integral and influential within it, but I can't say that's the whole game, because I think lots of people would testify that wherever a transformation program's in town, it's normally the operations, the finance, the technologists that are sort of at the forefront of it. And HR is kind of going, yeah, but what about me? What about people? What about culture? What about learning? So we do tend to be a little bit late invitees to that party. But like I say, I'm quite fortunate in that I work with HR leaders who are often actually catalysing that change. They're sort of going, come on, organisation, we can't keep doing this. We've got either rotating doors, we've got potentially quite toxic environments that people are having to work in. That's not sustainable. You know, we've got pressures on all sorts of areas that are to do with human beings. And actually all we're doing is trying to crank the handle a little bit harder. That's not going to work. So they're not just doing it from a moralistic standpoint. I'd say they're doing it from a more sort of enterprise standpoint, which is almost like, if you really want this organization to flow and fly, you can't just do it by pushing people beyond their limits. So they're not just looking at people from a wellness point of view. They are looking at sustainable performance. They're looking at being future ready. They're looking at embedding the principles of a change initiative beyond the initiative into that's how we need to be. So they're holding some quite, like, I'd say, important spaces. And the other key trait of that is they're often right next to the CEO on that. So you've got a kind of people savvy CEO who's like, yes, I'm backing you with that. So let's link arms and bring this whole thing together. But like I say, that's probably the exception rather than the rule. The rule would probably be they're still a little bit too late to the party. They're a little bit underthought of, and elbowing their way in is not an easy thing to do.
What is it they're actually doing to be on the transformation agenda and to be peering up with the CIO and CFO in that space?
Great observation, because I think they're not looking at it as a here we go again transformation version 92. I think they're going, it's very different now, and it is. So I'm not just over exaggerating the sense that, you know, just because AI is knocking on the door or there's continued kind of economic pressures and world chaos in the mix, I think they're kind of going, this isn't just an iterative process. This is absolutely a new version of us, and that new version of us means we've got to tackle things that are systemically rife, I suppose, both that need fixing and that are opportunities for us to step into. So I would say they've got commercialism in mind, even if they're in a non-profit or public sector kind of environment. They're not looking to make more profit. They're looking to go, the envelope's quite tight. So therefore, how do we be more commercial about where we put capital resource in order to return and serve customers, beneficiaries, clients, citizens, whatever it is? So that commercial nous is evident. It doesn't mean they read a P&L like an accountant, but they know that inefficiency, loss, friction, lag, they're all dangerous things for an organization. So they're standing quite strongly in that. And I guess they're also wanting to depart from, this is what you expected me to do in the past. Look after recruitment, look after onboarding, well-being, learning. It's got to be beyond that. It's got to be the whole system of how we engage people in the work they do, that is balanced and sustainable and makes the most use of their talent, because the most difficult thing for us is lining up that resource to what matters outside of us and for the people who rely on us, really. So I think they take a beyond moralistic argument. They're very commercially savvy, but they're also very much about what does it take for this organization to operate differently, very different.
That comes down to, we are heading to 2030. You know, a lot of that well-being and development roles and responsibilities, organizational structures that the HR community would have traditionally done was back in the 2010s. But we're now really heading into the 2030s, and we are facing a fundamental change to our organizations, politically, culturally,
Yep.
technology,
Yep.
all of the levers of our PESTLE
Yep.
analysis is saying organizations are facing into that. So
Mm.
I've got a concern, Terry, that
Mm.
the human and honest side of transformation is lacking. Are you seeing that? Is the HR community seeing that?
So I'd say yes and yes. I think the lacking generally is that the drivers for it are mechanical still. And therefore they feel like it's a new version of industrial thinking, but with silicon rather than steam or electricity or whatever that's powered it in the past. And that's not just to say that it's all about technology, but clearly that is opening all sorts of frontiers and it is becoming a little bit Wild West again. And it makes the dot-com era of the sort of late 90s and early noughties look like a walk in the park, because there are so many things that we're looking at the fabric of what technology does and kind of going, but we used to deploy it. Now it feels like it's got a mind of its own, and it kind of has and it hasn't. Do you know what I mean? It's only going to do what we tell it to do, but at the same time, it can learn and adapt to that because we're also telling it to do that. So we've unleashed that genie. So there's definitely something different about it, and that is causing a little bit of a reaction in some who are going, but this is fundamentally not just about new mechanics. It is literally like, where is the soul, spirit, purpose, meaning, essence, connectivity, and just the whole rationale behind why I show up and work here? It has to be revisited because it's going to be very different. It's not how it was before. So, you know, it will take the financial industry as an example. They're all withdrawing from high street presence. They're all going down to app-based things. And yet we know that there are people in the communities who are absolutely relying on a presence that they can go to sort out their financial affairs. But there are some organizations that are being human and honest, and they're going, we're going to do the best of tech, but we're not going to take that away because that's not who we are. So there are a few organizations that are not going to go along with that trend. And they're going to say our business model is different. Our business model is community banking. It is with a sense of looking after people who would otherwise be completely discarded by that industry. So there's something in that. The human and honest thing is coming through in a few players, and that will be their key differentiator. That will be the ones who will say, we do it differently. And you see it in some of the TV ads, right? Some of them deliberately go down that route of, we're not old school, we're just new school, but with the traditional values. Some people would say they can't coexist, and I'll say that's poppycock, because just because we had modern art, that didn't stop traditional art forms becoming still desirable and attainable and really, really revered. So there's a new twist on it, but that doesn't mean to say the old twist disappears, because it just takes on a different shape and form. Those are the organizations that are keeping human and honest. Others are just still chasing the dollar, looking at the efficiencies, and that herd might end up being like lemmings over the cliff.
Yeah. The thing with AI, everything I read, everything I see, the algorithms are probably working against me because I am only seeing the technical side of
I
AI.
get it.
That anti-AI side that you're talking about, that community side
Mm,
of bringing out the human more, worrying about our
mm.
communities, being more face to face rather than just looking at the screen, could definitely happen, couldn't it? With a sort of being anti-AI,
Yeah.
there could be a rebellion against companies that have AI of wanting to be more human. So you post a hell of a lot on
Yep.
LinkedIn about future state
Mm-hmm.
organizations, and you talk about the polymorphic
Mm.
organization.
Yeah.
And I struggle to spell it and say it. So can you tell me a bit
Of
more
course I
about
can.
that, Perry?
Yeah. Here's a great example of old into new, right? Because the word polymorphic is from ancient Greek language, and it means poly, many, morphe, forms, so many forms. And it exists in biology. So I often use the example of an octopus that can change its shape and its color and it's all sorts of things. But I mean, it's not just in that, it's in ecosystems and so on. But in technology, it means that an object in a computer program doesn't just have one function, it will do different things depending on the data it receives. That triggered me to think, that's an organization. It will do different things depending on the data it receives. And what we do is we try and build standardization, replication, and scale into organizations as if they're a machine, but they're staffed and they're almost interacted with by organisms that are human and variable, and they don't just want the same thing, and so on. So there is and there kind of always has been this kind of dilemma. How do you get that standardization, but you also can create adaptability? So mass customization, I suppose, was the word. Now, in the way organizations operate, increasingly, for all the pressures you've talked about, we can't just be a hierarchical, stratified, divisional function. We've got to be the sort of organization that can go, but what does the world, market, customer base, our own people, what do they need us to be like in terms of shape and flow and logic and shifting priorities? And you don't get that from a fixed mechanical stratified structure. You have to have adaptability, fluidity to be more octopus, I suppose. But that's a bit of a leap because a lot of people are so schooled in that standardized approach. So like, how does that work at scale? It's like, actually, it always works at scale because, a city doesn't have just one way of operating. It's multiple systems, multiple perspectives, multiple dynamics at play. So we've got to look at organizations a bit more like a dynamic city. Now, the whole sense of a polymorphic organization is that it respects tradition and heritage and legacy, but it also reveres future and possibilities. It just doesn't disband or discard one in favor of the other. I have this term organizational oscillation. It kind of oscillates between the two, a bit like sound waves. They kind of peak and then they soften. And the whole thing about transformation, coming back to your earlier point about a human and honest, is we always think about transformation as growth, expansion, more, bigger, faster. But actually, transformation is also consolidation, stabilization, steadying, really strengthening who we are and what we're about. A polymorphic organization says, I might not expand at every transformation, I might consolidate and look smaller and tighter. But actually, that's what I need to do because the market's ridiculously volatile. I need to protect myself. When the market's a bit more open to experimentation, I'm going to go for it and expand out. So it's that kind of logic that needs to come in with multiple systems, mindsets, roles, accountabilities, and so on. So it doesn't say let's completely rewrite the book. It says let's kind of adapt musical notes for a form that actually, we know can play to the kind of concerto that we're talking about. So classical music and drum and bass might not look like the same thing, but they're using the same kind of sequencing of chords and octaves and all that. So it's like, there you go. That's what an organization that's polymorphic would be. A bit of drum and bass and a bit of classic.
And that's making me think it's not just about being human and honest. And you're talking about it's not just about growth and driving out costs. To me, that's making me think of human, honest, and
Yeah,
healthy.
healthy, definitely.
Healthy
Yeah,
organization. So when you're
yeah,
posting about the
mm,
polymorphic
yeah,
organization, LinkedIn, who's showing up in your
yeah.
comments? Who's wanting to drive it
Mm.
forwards?
So there are lots of organizations I've revered for quite some time who I would say wouldn't even describe themselves as that, but they are because they're very adaptable and can shift and change. There's a nursing outfit in the Netherlands called Buurtzorg, who for about the last kind of 20 years have been very nurse led, but still really efficient. And their outputs are not just, are we making good use of nurses' time? Their patients are living longer. They have better quality of life. They're hospitalized less. They're saving the healthcare system money because they're making people's agency as strong as ever and they look after themselves. So there are organizations like that that can adapt and can shift and can do the right thing and change. And that's absolutely hardwired into them. I see some examples in some of the pharmaceutical industry who are having to really think differently about drug research and shorter cycles of development. So you're seeing this in Bayer, you're seeing this in GSK, you're seeing it in Pfizer, you're seeing Moderna. Lots of these companies are sort of saying, we've got to solve problems in a different way now. We've got technology that can get us there quicker, but that doesn't mean to say we just churn them out. We've got to think about what's best for the planet and society. And again, I think any organization that's a certified B Corp is likely to be one that's tuned into more parameters than just profit. It's thinking planet, it's thinking people, it's thinking communities, it's thinking, about the kind of right thing to do and the morals and the ethics. And they're much more likely to be adaptable and change and shape shift in order to meet the market and the changing demands of what the ecosystems of the world need. So Patagonia and all those kinds of folk who really, really have a manifesto for something bigger than just making money are often ones who would be adaptable by nature. So polymorphism exists. People just don't call it that because I kind of invented it about like a year ago.
So did you invent it pre-AI?
No. It came after
No.
AI. And I think AI is a big catalyst in it. Yeah, AI was almost like a thing that's going, well, that's tearing apart those orthodox structures. And we're not really accounting for it in that way. We're thinking it's plug and play technology and lopping people off. It's like, it really isn't. It is changing almost every feature and facet about how you use your data and how you can design work and people's value that adds on top of that. But we're not taking those kind of equations. We're thinking about it as another technological thing, and it's not. It's much bigger than that. So it was an aim at trying to give it a slightly higher plateau of if you're going to do the AI thing, you might as well change the whole game, right? Because that's really what you should be doing.
And, AI is on everyone's lips. Everyone's talking
Mm.
about it. We've sort of touched on it. Um, this is going to bring challenges for the transformation community, be it IT, finance, and HR. How are you seeing the HR communities show up into the AI programs and AI initiatives?
In some respects, far too gently and cautiously, and almost expecting other people to lead on it. So I see a bit of that. There is almost a little bit of, well, surely we're the people function. So therefore, the last thing we want to do is mechanize and automate. It's like, have you asked your people? Because they would probably want some things to be mechanized and automated so they're easier to get to, swifter and in the flow of work. So there is something about we've got to be less naive about our role in it. And Moderna, I mentioned earlier on, well, they've recalibrated HR and IT to actually coexist and work together. That's perhaps a really interesting approach at both human spirit and automation possibility. But I am seeing some examples where, like the recruitment community and some of the sort of other more, again, sort of progressive HR teams are absolutely connecting AI to what is the service proposition I need to make for this organization and its people to drive it forward. And that will include some things that are previously high touch human but don't need to be, because I need to think, what does high touch human really look like? And that's in duty of care, future career prospects, redesigning entry level jobs as an example. That's a massive challenge for HR to sort of advise the business on, which is if we haven't got that work that we would normally start people on and we expect them to come in at a higher level, we've got to think differently about onboarding and learning and confidence and assimilation and mentoring and all this kind of stuff. So we ought to be asking those questions now because AI is changing it and using AI to help us get them there quicker and smarter and with better predictable outcomes. We've long struggled to show the value of what we do. I think AI could unlock an enormous amount of this is what human capital creates. We ought to absolutely double down on that, because then we can turn around to the business and go, you manage everything to within an inch of its life. Well, we've got the data that says that's harmful because people want this agency and scope. And here's the results, and here's what you need to do. I think when we can show the economic value that we can create by being more human and healthy, then businesses might go, what have I been doing? Yeah, let's do more of that.
And that HR role, if we go back to when AI was first introduced, 2 years ago,
Mm.
the phrase I was hearing is prompt
Yeah,
engineering,
yeah,
which sounded so
yeah. Mm.
technical, sounded so IT. In the last few months, it's become human in the loop
Yeah.
and human at, and that human side is the side that the HR community can bring into the program. And you said earlier that there are some pioneering HR strategic thinkers that really are looking at the agenda of the future state for an HR, for the organization and the enterprise. In some ways, every function is having to up their game in the era of AI because we're all introducing a future state. It's no longer, 2030 is literally 4 years away. And the world of AI in those 4 years is going to fundamentally change the shape of organizations, the shape of the technology stack, and the shape of everything that you and I and others do at work. What advice would you give to people to transform, not just technically, but also from that human perspective?
So I think you have to be in the AI domain in order to understand it. And by that, what I mean is you talked about prompt engineers, and that did sound very much like, oof, you need a lot of training to do that. Well, not now, because a lot of the bots we can use are incredibly strong on the natural language. So actually, you and it can start to form a little bit of a kind of co-coding relationship, and I've been doing that for a while. So I think if you get into it and start playing with it, you can start to think, hey, I can actually create the tech I want, not just the tech that's available. Wow, that's a big revelation. Because what that does is that then gets you to go, I've always wanted to change this process or absolutely sort of double down in this area. I've not been able to because tech hasn't enabled it and it's heavy lifting for me and hard work for me. Now I can get the bot to help me do that. So I think once you're in that sort of space, you can look at AI through a very different lens, which is I am not using it just because it's there. I'm using it to solve problems I thought were unsolvable before, but they're not now. And that I think is such an eye-opening revelation because you're like, now what else could I add to that list of things that have bugged me forever, haven't been resolved, are still sticky as hell, and now I can probably get some traction with an AI sort of application that can unlock what I can then do in a human, conversational, persuasive, relational fashion. My goodness me, that is the thing I would get people to double down on. So you're not just a prompt engineer, you are a systems architect.
And that's got to be it. I mean, hasn't it? That we started the conversation. You're the first person I've had in the room from the HR community. And it feels like we're ending the conversation on, yes, AI is a technical tool, but how we use it, how we
Yeah,
get the most out of it, how we drive the opportunities with it is
yeah,
actually being human with it.
yeah,
It's having a
yeah.
conversation with it. And it's actually asking it to help us
My
solve
word, yeah.
those problems that we thought were unsolvable.
Yeah, totally
Perry,
that. Wow.
it's been great talking to you.
So
Thank you.
yeah, no, thank you.
Whatever next, Unplugged. Conversations about making transformation more human, more honest, and more likely to stick. Find out more at whatevernextbook.com.